Simone Rodan-Benzaquen, we've had other times of tension in the past. How does this compare?
Yes, I think it's very important to remind everybody that indeed this has been going on, hasn't just happened. It's been going on for at least more or less 20 years. When you look at the late 90s, we'd have a few dozen anti-Semitic hate crimes. You go to the year of 2000, we have between 300 and 900 anti-Semitic acts a year. So it's a constant. The anti-Semitism has become structural in French society. What I think is the difference is, first of all, the amount. In a very short time period, we've had a lot of anti-Semitic attacks. You're right, depending on the nature, we'll have to see. But there have been a lot of anti-Semitic acts, more than two or three times more than last year.
Because we had the researcher Jean-Yves Camus on the other night explaining to us there are more acts being reported, but there's also more people coming forward. So in your view, is it a surge in anti-Semitism?
I think it is nevertheless a surge. It's not entirely clear because what we know from previous studies, indeed, is that about 80% of French Jews don't report anti-Semitic acts. We have seen it in our own surveys. About 80% don't report. Has that changed now? It's not entirely clear. But what we do know is that there is a huge amount of fear. I can tell you from a very personal experience, it's the first time in my life that I have people around me everywhere who have experienced anti-Semitism over the past few weeks. Everybody. I myself, I have changed my name on my app. I have changed the name on my door. People I know take off the mezuzah. So there is a sentiment of fear on the one hand, and then very concrete threats, whether it's in Ubers, whether it's on the streets, whether it's in Jewish schools. So there is definitely a threat. It reminds me a little bit of about what happened in 2012.
When there were the attack on the Jewish schools in Toulouse.
It sort of liberated a passionate hate that then was sort of legitimized. And that, I think, is slightly different than anything we've seen in previous conflicts, because in 2014, for example, we did have anti-Semitism in the streets, but not to the extent, I think, to this extent. And the other aspect is that what we have in France, now we have everywhere. We have it in Germany, we have it in the United Kingdom, we have it in the United States, we have it in Australia, we have it everywhere.
And you mentioned structural anti-Semitism. What do you mean?
It means that anti-Semitism has become part of French society. It's never gone away. We've never managed to go back.
How does that manifest itself structurally?
Structurally, it means that we have between 300 to 900 anti-Semitic acts a year. Every year. That means basically between 1 to 3 anti-Semitic acts on average a day for a population that represents less than 1% of the entire French population. And maybe an additional number, between 40 to 60% of all violent hate crimes, racist hate crimes in general, are of anti-Semitic nature. So there is something in our society, and it has been going on over the past 2 decades. And let's not forget, people have been killed in 2003, in 2006, in 2012, in 2015. People have been killed in France.
All right, let's talk. We're going to talk about politics now, but before we do, just a quick question about this line of inquiry that's being undertaken by authorities in this country. We reported on it last week, a wave of Stars of David spray-painted on buildings in Paris. Could it have come from abroad? Police searching for at least one, possibly more suspects after the arrest of a 29-year-old and a 31-year-old Moldovan. They say they're tourists who came to Paris. According to the Paris prosecutor, they acted on command. They claim to have acted on command of a third party for compensation, which was backed up by a Russian language conversation on their telephone. Simone Rodan-Benzaquen, have you had your thoughts on this? Because again, this blurs the line that there could be the Kremlin making mischief and stirring up this feeling.
It's absolutely possible. It wouldn't be the first time that the Kremlin has been exploiting situations across Europe, whether it's the financing of far-right parties across Europe, whether it's propaganda on social media. It wouldn't be surprising, given also that there is a certain alliance today between Russia, between Iran, between sort of what President Bush would have called the axis of evil. But I want to go back to what about the specificity about the anti-Semitism in France. I think there is a specificity, and I think Marie Calter is also right about the fact that each country is specific as well. But there is something very peculiar about France, about the fact that we've had over the past 20 years really an assembly of different forms of anti-Semitism. It's multiform, it's not just one form. We have the far right that still exists, that is still present in France. We have the anti-Semitism, which is called new anti-Semitism, which is the anti-Semitism related to the hatred of Israel. We have the anti-Semitism from the far left that goes into that. And we have the anti-Semitism, again, as Marie Calter said, from within the Muslim community. So we have all of this. And it's interesting because there were moments, for example, in 2014 called Jour de colère, Day of Anger, where all of this had come together, where it was a big demonstrations in the streets of Paris originally against the gay marriage bill that was done by François Hollande, and for where you had people in the street that have nothing in common, from the far right, from the far left, from within the banlieue, have nothing in common. And the one thing that they did, they were in the streets of Paris and shouted, France, 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 Jews out of France, France is not yours. So there is sort of a coming together of different extremes that exists within France, and that is very specific, I think, in France, but that we are now starting to see elsewhere. Germany, for example, we had mostly far-right anti-Semitism. We now also see anti-Semitism coming from within the Muslim community. The United States, we had Pittsburgh, of course, but we now also have anti-Semitism coming from campuses, from pro-Palestinian movements, from Islamist movement, from the far left within the Democratic Party. So I would say that France was a little bit of at the forefront of now a global phenomenon that is starting to spread across the world.
Simone Rodan-Benzaquen, the presence of the National Rally, they say we're not an anti-Semitic party. We had Jordan Bardella, the president of the party, saying that Jean-Marie Le Pen is not anti-Semitic, even though he's been convicted 6 times for anti-Semitic speech.
So first of all, let me start out with the first thing. I think it's extremely important that this march is taking place. We spoke earlier about the solitude of the Jewish community, about the fact that there has been a huge rise of anti-Semitism. Jews are afraid. Jews need solidarity. Jews need to know that the rest of the French Republic understands that anti-Semitism is not a problem for the Jewish community alone, but a problem for the country as a whole. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, the National Front, the Rassemblement National, previously known National Front, has anti-Semitic roots. Of course, there are still anti-Semitic people around Marine Le Pen. Of course, Jordan Bardella, by denying that Jean-Marie Le Pen is anti-Semitic, is denying the very essence of what the roots are of the Rassemblement National. But I would say, just as Minister Olivier Véran said, it's a public march. We didn't ask ourselves the question on January 11th. After the hypercacher attacks and the Charlie Hebdo attacks. It was a march for the Republic against terrorism, and whoever wanted to participate did participate. The fact that we are actually discussing it and going into the politics between the far left and the far right is frankly, it's indecent. And the fact that Mélenchon himself is every single time instrumentalizing the issue, is really creating further hatred, putting the Jews in the corner, pretending. I mean, at the end of the day, what is it? It's pretending to say that actually Jews are massacring Palestinians and Jews are far right, which, by the way, he has previously already said. So he's really marginalizing Jews and actually putting an additional target on their already very fragile situation. So I think it's very important to say we have to march, and I hope that thousands of people will be in the streets again to march for the Republic and let the political games out of this.